Hello everyone, I am very glad that you're joining this story. Subscribe, like and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
I had never expected an extravagant invitation, never assumed there would be some heartfelt moment where my brother reached out just to tell me how much he wanted me there, never believed that I was some treasured part of his holiday traditions. But I had at least thought I would be included. I had thought that, like every other year, there would be a time and a place given, a casual mention of when dinner would be, a passing remark about the gift exchange, an expectation that I would show up with a bottle of wine and a few presents for the kids, just like I always had before. But instead, when I called him a week before Christmas, expecting nothing more than a quick confirmation of plans, I got something else entirely, something that shifted the way I saw him. Something that burned its way into my memory so deeply that I knew I would never be able to unhear it, something that changed everything. He had answered the phone in his usual way, his voice casual, unbothered, like he had barely thought about me at all, like my existence was nothing more than an afterthought. Like this conversation was just another minor inconvenience in his otherwise perfect day. "Oh, hey," he had said, already distracted, already half checked out of the conversation, already treating me like I was a favor he was doing rather than his own blood. I didn't waste time, didn't dance around it, didn't see the need to pretend like I wasn't calling for the exact same reason I called every December, because I was trying to hold this family together, because I was the one making the effort, because I was the one who cared enough to make sure I was included. "Hey," I had said, keeping my voice light, casual, as if I didn't already feel the slight shift in his tone, the way he wasn't fully engaged. "Just wanted to check in on Christmas plans. Are we doing dinner at your place again this year?" Silence. A pause just long enough to make my stomach twist, just long enough to tell me something was wrong, just long enough to make me regret making the call in the first place. Then, finally, he cleared his throat, let out a small chuckle, the kind that made my skin crawl, the kind that let me know that he was about to say something he knew would hurt me, but he didn't care. "Oh, yeah, about that," he said, his voice laced with something smug, something dismissive, something that made my fingers tighten around my phone without me even realizing it. "We're keeping it small this year, you know? Just immediate family. You get it. Immediate family." The words hit me harder than I expected them to, sinking in before I even had time to process them, before I even had time to understand what he was really saying, before I had time to fully grasp the fact that I was standing here, holding the phone, listening to my own brother tell me that I wasn't included in my own family's Christmas. I forced out a small, confused laugh, trying to give him a chance to correct himself, trying to make sense of what I was hearing, trying to believe, stupidly, naively, that maybe I had just misunderstood. "Immediate family?" I repeated, keeping my voice light, even, measured, as if the ground hadn't just shifted beneath me. "I am immediate family." And that was when he said it. That was when he let out a small, amused huff, the kind of sound people make when they think they're being generous by explaining something obvious, the kind of sound that dripped with condescension, the kind of sound that made my blood turn ice cold before the words even left his mouth. "I mean, yeah, technically," he said, drawing out the words, letting them settle between us, letting me absorb them before delivering the final blow. "But, come on, Christmas isn't really a place for losers, right?" I stood there, frozen, unable to speak, unable to react, unable to do anything but let those words hang in the air, wrapping themselves around my throat like a vice, cutting off whatever response I might have had, choking out whatever illusion I had still been holding on to about where I stood in his life. Loser. The word echoed in my head, repeating over and over again, bouncing around my skull like a cruel joke I had somehow become the punchline of, filling every empty space inside me with a kind of anger I hadn't felt in years. Loser. Because I wasn't married with a perfect house and 2 kids. Because I didn't have a spouse who handled everything for me while I sat back and pretended I had done it all on my own. Because I had worked for everything I had instead of leaning on other people, instead of taking, instead of expecting, instead of treating those around me like their only purpose was to make my life easier. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my phone. I wanted to demand to know why he thought he could say that to me, why he thought he had the right to reduce me to nothing, why he thought he could sit in the house I had helped him pay for and call me a loser. But instead, I swallowed it all down, forced myself to stay calm, forced myself to see this for what it was, a moment of absolute, undeniable clarity. For so long, I had convinced myself that this was just how he was, that he wasn't intentionally cruel, that he was just careless with his words, that he didn't mean to make me feel like I was less. But now, standing here, hearing it come straight from his mouth, hearing him laugh as he dismissed me, hearing the sheer lack of concern in his voice, I realized that I had been lying to myself. He knew exactly what he was saying. And he meant it. So I did something that he wasn't expecting. I agreed. Yeah, I said, keeping my voice calm, keeping my tone level, keeping myself from revealing even an ounce of the rage burning in my chest. You're right. Christmas isn't a place for losers. He let out a small laugh, the sound of someone who believed they had just won, the sound of someone who had no idea that the rules of the game had just changed entirely. Glad you understand, he said, his voice dripping with casual dismissal. No hard feelings, okay? I smiled, letting the silence stretch just long enough to let him think the conversation was over, just long enough to let myself fully absorb the moment, just long enough to make sure I would never forget the way this felt. No hard feelings, I said, my voice smooth, effortless, carrying a weight that he didn't even register. Because if I wasn't family enough for Christmas, I wasn't family enough to pay his bills. I sat in my living room long after the phone call had ended, staring at nothing, feeling the weight of what had just happened settle over me like a thick, suffocating fog, pressing into my chest, making it hard to breathe. It wasn't just the words he had said, not just the cruel ease with which he had dismissed me, not just the casual way he had reduced me to nothing more than an outsider looking in. It was the realization that this had never been anything new, that this wasn't some shocking betrayal, that this wasn't some one-time mistake. This was just the moment I finally saw it for what it was. Because the truth was, my brother had always been like this. He had always taken, always expected, always assumed that no matter what, no matter how many times he pushed me aside, no matter how many times he treated me like I was an afterthought, I would still be there when he needed me. Still be the safety net waiting beneath him, still be the person who swooped in at the last second to fix whatever mess he had made. And for years, without even realizing it, I had played right into it, had allowed him to use me, had convinced myself that this was just how families worked, that this was just what I was supposed to do. I thought back to the first time I had helped him financially, back when he and his wife had just gotten married, when they had called me late at night, voices panicked, desperate, full of the kind of urgency that made it impossible to say no. They had been behind on rent, just one bad month, just one little setback, just one unexpected expense that had thrown everything off. And I had believed them. Of course, I had believed them. I had wired the money immediately, told them it was no big deal, told them I was happy to help, told them that's what family was for. I hadn't thought twice about it then, hadn't seen the pattern beginning to form, hadn't realized that it wasn't one bad month, that it wasn't just this once, that it wasn't an emergency. It was the start of something much bigger, something that would quietly, slowly, completely consume me before I even realized what was happening. Because after that, the calls kept coming. Sometimes it was rent, sometimes it was groceries, sometimes it was the electric bill, sometimes it was car trouble, sometimes it was the kids needing new clothes, sometimes it was just a little extra to help get through the holidays. And every time, without fail, I gave. Not because I had to, not because I was rolling in money, not because I didn't have my own bills to pay, but because I genuinely believed that they needed me, that they were struggling, that they were just going through another rough patch. But looking back now, I saw the truth. It wasn't that they had needed me. It was that they had counted on me. Because I had made it easy for them. Because I had never once asked for anything in return. Because I had never once set a boundary. Because I had never once given them a reason to believe that the money wouldn't be there when they wanted it, that the support wouldn't come the second they asked, that I wouldn't always be standing behind them, ready to throw them a lifeline whenever things got too difficult. And what had I gotten in return? Not gratitude. Not appreciation. Not even a simple acknowledgement of what I had done for them. No, all I had ever received was expectation, assumption, entitlement, the ever-growing belief that my money wasn't a favor, it was a requirement. And now, sitting there in the quiet of my apartment, the weight of years of being used pressing down on me, I felt something shift inside me, something deep, something irreversible. Because it wasn't just that they had relied on me. It wasn't just that they had taken me for granted. It was that they had built their entire lives around my money. They weren't just comfortable. They were comfortable on my dime. The decision to stop funding their lives didn't come with some grand speech, didn't come with an angry confrontation, didn't come with a moment where I laid out everything they had done wrong and demanded they take accountability. It didn't come with a fight, didn't come with a dramatic declaration, didn't come with me screaming about how they had used me for years without a second thought. No, it came with a quiet, simple, and entirely unspoken decision. A few clicks, a few canceled payments, a few financial ties severed in the span of a single evening. I sat at my desk, staring at my bank account, scrolling through the recurring transactions that had, for far too long, been taken for granted, scanning the list of expenses that weren't mine, but had somehow become my responsibility. The extra amount I had been covering on their rent, the payment I had been making toward their car loan, the automatic grocery fund I had set up to make sure the kids didn't go without, the emergency credit card that I had initially opened for myself but had somehow ended up in my brother's hands, all of it sat there, clear as day, a record of every time I had made their lives easier, of every time I had told myself that this was the last time, of every moment I had justified just one more payment because I had convinced myself that they really needed it. But they hadn't needed it. They had expected it. So, without hesitating, I started removing them. The rent assistance? Gone. The car loan payments? Cancelled. The grocery fund? Cut off. The credit card? Frozen. By the time I was finished, my balance looked different, lighter, as if I had just taken off a heavy coat that I hadn't even realized I had been wearing, as if I had just put down a weight that had been digging into my shoulders for years. And the best part? They had no idea. I didn't say a word, didn't give them a warning, didn't send them a message letting them know that their safety net was gone, didn't offer them a single explanation, because I knew, without a doubt, that they would figure it out soon enough. And when they did, I wanted them to feel it, wanted them to experience what it was like to suddenly find themselves standing on their own. Wanted them to understand what it meant to be truly independent instead of just playing the part while quietly depending on me to keep everything from falling apart. It didn't take long for the first signs to show. At first, it was subtle, small shifts in their behavior, tiny cracks forming in the carefully constructed facade of their lives, little moments that told me, without them even realizing it, that things weren't going as smoothly as they had expected. My brother, who had always been so smug, so self-assured, so casually dismissive of me and everything I had done for them, suddenly started replying to my messages a little too quickly, started reaching out more frequently, started pretending to care about how I was doing in a way that felt almost unnatural, almost rehearsed, almost forced. Then came the first message from his wife, the one that was so painfully obvious in its attempt to manipulate me that I almost laughed when I read it. Hey, just wanted to check in. Haven't heard from you in a while. Hope everything's okay. Let me know if you want to grab coffee sometime. I miss our chats. I stared at the screen, reading the words over and over again, marveling at how transparent it was, at how she had suddenly developed an interest in checking in when, just a week ago, I had been nothing more than an afterthought, an outsider. A loser unworthy of being included in their perfect little Christmas celebration. And yet, here she was, reaching out, pretending to be concerned, pretending to miss me, pretending to care, all because she had felt the shift, all because she had noticed that something was missing, all because she had realized that the invisible hand that had been keeping them afloat had suddenly vanished. I didn't respond. 2 days later, another message. Hey, just wondering if everything's okay. We tried using the card the other day, and it looks like there's some kind of issue. Not sure if the bank messed something up or if you just forgot to transfer funds, but let me know. And there it was. The first sign of panic. The first crack in their delusion. The first moment where they started realizing that things weren't going the way they had planned. I could almost picture it, the way she had stood at the checkout counter, swiping the card over and over again, her confusion turning into frustration, her frustration turning into realization, the slow, creeping horror of understanding that she didn't have access to my money anymore, that the safety net had been cut, that the thing she had always counted on, the thing she had always assumed would be there, was gone. Still, I didn't respond. Instead, I let the silence stretch between us, let her sit in the discomfort, let her feel the weight of her own financial situation pressing down on her for the first time, let her start to panic as she realized that things weren't going back to normal, that this wasn't just some temporary glitch, that this was something much, much worse. And as the days passed, as the messages kept coming, as the tone slowly shifted from concern to confusion to frustration, I sat back and watched, feeling lighter than I had in years, knowing, without a doubt, that they were starting to panic. And I wasn't stopping it. The messages from my brother started coming in more frequently, and with each one, I could see the slow unraveling of his carefully constructed confidence, the gradual descent from casual manipulation into something much uglier, something desperate, something frantic. At first, he had tried to play it off like nothing was wrong, pretending that his sudden interest in my life was genuine, pretending that he had just been thinking about me, pretending that he actually cared about how I was doing when, in reality, he was only concerned about one thing: the money. His first few messages had been light, conversational, the kind of thing that might have worked on me before, back when I still believed he saw me as anything other than a walking bank account. Back when I was still naive enough to think that our relationship was built on anything real. Hey, haven't heard from you in a bit. Hope you're doing okay. Let me know if you want to grab lunch soon. It's been too long. I ignored it, knowing exactly what he was doing, knowing that this wasn't about lunch, knowing that he wasn't actually reaching out because he missed me, knowing that this was just the opening move in a game he had played 100 times before. A game where I was supposed to feel guilty, where I was supposed to start doubting myself, where I was supposed to be the one who reached out first, apologizing for something I hadn't even done. A few days later, another message, this one still casual, but carrying just the slightest edge of something beneath the surface, something pressing, something urgent. Mom was asking about you the other day. She's worried. You know how she gets when you disappear like this. I almost laughed when I read it, almost let out a full-body laugh at the sheer audacity of it, at the way he was already trying to drag her into this, at the way he was already laying the groundwork for the next step in his little plan. Because he wasn't stupid, he knew exactly what he was doing, he knew exactly how to push my buttons, he knew exactly which strings to pull to get the reaction he wanted. And the biggest, easiest, most effective weapon he had? Our mother. So I wasn't even remotely surprised when, a few days later, she called. I let the phone ring 3 times before answering, already knowing how this conversation was going to go, already knowing the exact tone she was going to use, already preparing myself for the long, exhausting lecture I was about to receive. Oh, sweetheart, she sighed the second I picked up, the kind of sigh that was designed to sound like it came from a place of deep, personal suffering, the kind of sigh that was meant to make me feel like I had done something wrong. The kind of sigh that carried the weight of a million unspoken accusations. What is going on with you? Why are you doing this? I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch between us, waiting to see if she would say it outright, waiting to see if she would actually admit that this was about the money, waiting to see if she would drop the act and finally tell the truth. She didn't. Instead, she kept her voice soft, carefully measured, laced with just enough disappointment to make it sting. Your brother told me you've been acting strange, she continued, the words slow, deliberate, dripping with concern that I knew was anything but real. He said you won't return his calls, that you're shutting him out, that you won't even speak to him anymore. And I just don't understand, sweetheart. We're family. There it was. That word. That one little word that she had spent my entire life using against me, That one little word that was supposed to make everything I had done for them obligatory. That one little word that she had twisted into something ugly, something suffocating, something designed to make me feel trapped. We're family. I had lost count of how many times she had used that exact phrase to justify something, how many times she had thrown it in my face whenever she needed me to do something I didn't want to do, how many times she had made it clear that in our family, love wasn't something freely given, it was something earned. And yet, somehow, despite all of that, despite the years of taking and taking and taking, despite every moment where I had put them first only to be treated like I didn't matter, despite the fact that my own brother had looked me in the eye and told me that Christmas isn't a place for losers, she still had the audacity to sit there and ask me why I was doing this. I exhaled slowly, keeping my voice calm, keeping myself from giving her the emotional reaction she was looking for, keeping myself from falling into the trap she had set. "I'm not doing anything," I said, my tone even, steady, completely unreadable. "I'm just taking a break." She let out another sigh, heavier this time, as if I was personally hurting her, as if my decision to remove myself from the situation was some deep betrayal, as if I was attacking her simply by choosing to stop giving. "But sweetheart, he needs you," she said, and there it was, the real reason for the call, the real thing she had been trying to work up to, the real message she had been sent to deliver. "They're going through a hard time right now, and I just don't think this is the right moment for you to be pulling away. You know how much he's always counted on you." I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply, letting the words settle, letting myself absorb the fact that she truly, genuinely, honestly believed that this was my problem to fix, that it was my job to make sure he didn't struggle, that it was my responsibility to step in and save him from the consequences of his own choices. I had spent my whole life believing that if I just did enough, if I just gave enough, if I just proved myself, then maybe, just maybe, they would finally see me, would finally love me, would finally accept me as an equal. But sitting here, listening to my mother tell me that my brother needed me, that I was wrong for setting a boundary, that I was hurting the family by refusing to let them keep using me, I realized something. They never would. They had never valued me as a person, only as a provider. And now, as I sat in the wreckage of their crumbling dependency, watching them grasp at straws, watching them scramble to find new ways to manipulate me, watching them panic as they realized that I wasn't playing the game anymore, I felt nothing but cold, quiet satisfaction. Because he was cracking. But I wanted him shattered. I knew it was only a matter of time before my brother cracked, before the frustration turned into desperation, before the carefully controlled manipulation gave way to something raw and unfiltered, before he stopped pretending that this was just some misunderstanding and finally admitted to himself, if no one else, that he was in trouble. I had seen it coming from the moment I stopped the money, from the moment the automatic payments vanished, from the moment I let the weight of his own responsibilities settle onto his shoulders for the first time in years. And now, after weeks of watching him struggle, after watching the guilt trips fail, after ignoring every carefully crafted message designed to pull me back in, I was finally getting exactly what I had been waiting for. The moment where he completely lost control. He showed up at my door unannounced, pounding against it like he was trying to break it down, his anger radiating through the wood, his voice already raised, already demanding, already carrying the weight of a man who had convinced himself that he was owed something. I took my time getting to the door, took a deep breath before opening it, took a moment to let myself fully absorb what was about to happen, because I wanted to be sure that when I looked him in the eye, when I finally faced him down, there wasn't a single crack in my resolve. The moment I pulled the door open, I was met with the sight of him standing there, his face flushed red, his breathing uneven, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, his entire body radiating barely contained fury. He looked different, disheveled in a way I had never seen before, like he had been unraveling for days, like he had been carrying the weight of this meltdown for far too long, like he had been waiting, begging, for an excuse to finally let it all out. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he demanded, his voice sharp, laced with something close to disbelief, as if I was the one who had done something insane, as if I was the one who had broken some unspoken rule, as if I was the one who had ruined everything. Are you seriously going to sit here and act like you didn't just everything up for me? I raised an eyebrow, crossing my arms over my chest, tilting my head slightly as I studied him, as I let the full weight of his words sink in, as I let myself truly absorb the audacity of what he was saying. I'm sorry, what exactly did I up for you? I asked, my voice calm, controlled, carefully devoid of any emotion, because I wanted him to hear himself, wanted him to say it out loud, wanted him to admit what this was really about. He let out a sharp, bitter laugh, shaking his head like he couldn't believe he even had to explain it to me, like I was being deliberately difficult, like I was the one being unreasonable. Don't play dumb, he snapped, taking a step closer, his presence looming, his frustration tangible, his desperation clawing at the edges of his anger. You know exactly what you did. You cut me off. You abandoned your own family, and for what? Because I didn't invite you to Christmas? Are you seriously that petty? There it was. The moment of truth. The moment where he finally acknowledged what this was really about, where he finally admitted that he had noticed, that he had felt it. That he had spent the last few weeks watching his perfectly curated life fall apart without the financial support he had built it on. And yet, even now, even as he stood in front of me, furious and unraveling, even as he admitted that he had needed me more than he had ever let on, he still refused to take responsibility, still refused to acknowledge that he had done this to himself, still refused to admit that this was his fault. I exhaled slowly, letting the silence stretch between us, letting him stew in his own frustration, letting the weight of his own words settle over him before I finally spoke. You're mad at me, I said, my voice slow, deliberate, careful, as if I was piecing it together in real time, as if I was trying to understand him, as if I was giving him the benefit of the doubt when, in reality, I already knew exactly how this conversation was going to end. Because I stopped paying your bills. Because I stopped cleaning up your messes. Because I finally realized that you don't actually care about me, you just care about what I can do for you. His expression flickered for just a moment, something shifting in his eyes, something breaking, something betraying the truth of what we both already knew. But it was gone just as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by more anger, more frustration, more deflection, more excuses. This isn't about that, he argued, shaking his head violently, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides like he was trying to keep himself from lashing out. It's about the fact that you're acting like a selfish like you don't give a damn about your own family, like you actually think you're better than us just because you have a little bit of money. I let out a quiet laugh, shaking my head, because it was almost impressive how quickly he had twisted this into something else, how seamlessly he had managed to make me the villain, how effortlessly he had turned my decision to set boundaries into some kind of personal attack against him. No, I said simply, meeting his gaze without hesitation, without wavering, without backing down even an inch. This is about the fact that you've been using me for years. And now that I've finally stopped letting you, you don't know what the to do with yourself. His jaw tightened, his breathing shallow, his entire body vibrating with barely contained rage, because he knew I was right, because he knew he had nothing left to say, because he knew, deep down, that this was the moment where he lost. I took a step forward, closing the space between us just enough to make sure he heard every single word I was about to say. You think I ruined your life? I asked, my voice lower now, colder, sharper, cutting through the air like a knife. No, you ruined your life. I just stopped saving you from the consequences. His face twisted, his hands clenching into fists, his entire body tensing like he was about to explode, like he was teetering on the edge of something irreversible, like he was realizing, for the first time in his entire life, that I wasn't going to fix this for him. Because he thought I would. He thought I would cave. He thought I would see how angry he was, how desperate he had become, how much he was suffering without my help, and that I would break the way I always had before, that I would give in, that I would save him. But he was wrong. I stood there, watching my brother struggle to find the right words, watching his face twist with frustration, watching the weight of reality finally start to settle onto his shoulders in a way it never had before. His whole life, he had managed to avoid consequences, had always found someone to bail him out, had always managed to spin his problems onto someone else, had always been the type to blame, to deflect, to twist the story so that he was the victim and everyone else was the villain. But now, as he stood in front of me, seething with barely contained rage, it was clear that for the first time in his life, he had no one left to blame but himself. "You really think this is funny, don't you?" He snapped, his voice sharp, his hands still clenched into fists, his entire body coiled with tension like he was barely holding himself together. "You really think this is some kind of game, like you're teaching me a lesson or something, like you're so much smarter than me." I tilted my head slightly, studying him, letting the silence stretch between us just long enough to make him uncomfortable, just long enough to make him realize that I wasn't reacting the way he wanted me to, that I wasn't rising to his anger, that I wasn't giving him the dramatic confrontation he was looking for. "It's not a game," I said finally, my voice calm, measured, unshaken by his outburst. "It's just reality. And the reality is, I'm done. I'm done fixing your problems. I'm done paying for your life. I'm done pretending like I owe you something when all you've ever done is take from me." He let out a harsh, bitter laugh, shaking his head like I had just said something ridiculous, like I was the one being unreasonable, like I was the one who had suddenly changed the rules of the game we had been playing for years. "You think you're better than me," he accused, his eyes narrowing, his voice dripping with resentment, with entitlement, with the same unshakable belief that had been ingrained in him his entire life, that he was owed something. That the world existed to make his life easier, that people like me existed to make sure he never had to struggle. I exhaled slowly, feeling the last traces of any lingering guilt dissolve into nothing, feeling the last remnants of whatever obligation I had once felt toward him completely disappear, feeling the final piece of my patience snap in half as I met his glare without hesitation. "No," I said, my voice quieter now, sharper, deadlier in its certainty. "I don't think I'm better than you. I know I am. Because unlike you, I don't expect other people to clean up my messes. Unlike you, I don't sit around waiting for someone to save me. Unlike you, I actually take responsibility for my own life instead of blaming everyone else when things don't go my way." His jaw tightened, his shoulders tensed, his face twisted with fury, but underneath all of it, underneath the anger, underneath the resentment, underneath the barely contained frustration, I saw something else, something much deeper, something much uglier. I saw fear. Because for the first time in his life, he was realizing that he had no backup plan, no safety net, no last-minute bailout. He was realizing that I wasn't bluffing, that I wasn't playing a game, that I wasn't going to swoop in and save him, that I wasn't coming back. I took a step forward, making sure he was listening, making sure he understood, making sure he felt the full weight of what I was about to say. "You said Christmas wasn't a place for losers," I reminded him, watching as his face darkened, watching as he remembered the exact moment he had said it, watching as he realized just how badly he had screwed himself. "Well, congratulations. Now you get to see what it really feels like to lose." He opened his mouth to say something, to argue, to spit out one last insult, one last desperate attempt to make himself feel like he still had some control over the situation, but I didn't let him. I turned around, walked back into my house, and shut the door in his face without another word, leaving him standing there, alone, drowning in the consequences of his own choices. Because revenge is sweet. But it comes at a price.